Did you know that in China, pregnant women are required to wear special shielded clothing that protects their unborn children? I didn't either. Protect them from what? This apron, commonly used by pregnant Chinese women, uses special fabric that shields the embryo from RF or microwave radiation, like the kind that comes out of your cell phone and Wi-Fi routers. Did you know that in Israel, the parliament approved a bill requiring all cell phones for sale have this label? Warning. The health ministry cautions that heavy use and carrying this device next to the body may increase the risk of cancer, especially among children. I didn't know that, nor did I know that in 2011, the World Health Organization reclassified RF radiation, or microwave radiation, as a Class 2B carcinogen. That's the same category as lead. This video is probably one of the most important exposés that I've done so far because the subject matter deeply impacts every single one of us. It impacts our families, our friends, our children, and our unborn grandchildren. It's why scientists with the most experience with these microwave frequencies are saying things like this.
I think anyone who puts Wi-Fi into a school should be locked up for the rest of their life. I really do. I think they're not fit to walk on the surface of this planet because they haven't looked at the research. They don't read all of the papers as I do.
And by the end of this video, you're going to know why he said that. There was a line from the George Orwell book 1984 that said, "The people will not revolt. They will not look up from their screens long enough to notice what is happening." Are we there yet? Today, the most profound revolutionary act that you can do is to become educated on nothing less than the whole truth. You have found a video that will bring you in the know of a very deep and pervasive danger that few realize exists. And unlike fear porn, also way too pervasive today, this video will arm you with the knowledge and understanding of this technology, as well as show you the tools that you can use to shield you and your families against it.
We have undercover footage of the World Health Organization in their private forum talking about how the confidence level among the physician community worldwide is decreasing. The WHO is trying to decide on a strategy, a marketing campaign. When you have to have a marketing strategy to convince the health professionals, those who have been appointed to safeguard our health and our children's health, you know that there's something that doesn't smell right. The Centers for Disease Control's own data shows that 1% of the population of the planet currently has autism. The current world's population is 7.7 billion. 1% of that is 77 million. According to the CDC's own data, 77 million children and young adults have autism on our planet right now. In 29 years to go from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 30, there's something wrong. Look at polio and then look at the incidence of DDT. Now, most chemical compounds that have been introduced into the global economy, it takes, of the dirty dozen, the 12 most toxic substances that are banned across every nation on the planet, those 12, before they became banned, had been used in global commerce for a minimum of 50 years, most of them for over 70 years before it was determined how dangerous they were. Now, back then, during the smallpox era, there was a chemical called DDT, and DDT is today considered one of those dirty dozen. Nobody uses it. It's considered toxic, and it's considered banned from all nations. But there were ads in the United States with children saying, "Flies don't land on me because I've had my DDT." So when people say, what's that got to do with polio? The incidence of polio, if you graph it, and the incidence of the use of DDT, polio was 6 months behind the incidence of DDT. So when you would see DDT levels peaking, you would see polio peak 6 months later. Then you'd see DDT usage dropping, you'd see polio 6 months later drop. This is a very interesting observation. I don't know whether that means that DDT was causing it, but certainly smallpox vaccine was not the reason that smallpox was eradicated. I believe it was because we stopped using DDT. So this is a political thing, but when it comes down to the aspect of vaccinations, people say, Dr. Buttar, you're an anti-vaxxer. I am not anti-vaccine, because if there was a vaccine that didn't have all those preservatives in there that are highly toxic, like mercury and formaldehyde and nickel, and didn't have the DNA adducts that are added to increase a reaction, if they didn't have various human cell lines, mutated human cell lines, DNA from other species like dogs and monkeys with other viral loads in there, if they didn't have all those things in there, and they actually were given at a time when a child could seroconvert, because we get these vaccines on the first day of the planet, yet a child's immune system can't even seroconvert, can't even mount an immune response till 6 months to a year of age. So now we've got all these components, and then using things like mercury, the body can't even eliminate it till the alimentary system is fully developed, which takes about a year for the alimentary tract to develop. But if they made a vaccine that didn't have DNA adducts, didn't have mutated human cell lines, didn't have adjuvants, didn't have mercury, nickel, formaldehyde, and other contaminants and other things that are dangerous that suppress the immune system, didn't have glyphosate, which now they have glyphosate in there, they have Roundup, the weed killer in vaccines. If they didn't have all that stuff in there, and it would actually given at a time when a child could actually seroconvert, like at a year and a half of age, and it didn't cause any harm, I would be all for it. I would be totally for it. We have over 7,400 doctors that have reached out over the last month. So we weren't able to get everybody on here, and people are busy and scheduled. So I believe that there's thousands and thousands of doctors worldwide that feel this way. They're just not being represented because the media is definitely trying to prevent this information from getting out. There's a lot of people that feel this and understand this. So it's one of those incredible moments when we start realizing that we are the vast majority, but because we're being singled out, because we're not getting a voice or a fair voice, it is being prevented. The information is being prevented from being disseminated to the world so that the question can be asked, why is this happening? Censorship is always something that an authoritarian dictatorship type government would want to when they want to prevent the dissemination of information. So rather than even trying to give a reason for the censorship, let's ask the millions of people out there that may be seeing this, why would anybody censor facts and truth about injury that's been caused by something that has been promoted for the last 20 or 30 years as the single most important safety component for our children, yet has caused more injuries, more documented injuries, millions of children being maimed worldwide? Why would you want to stop the conversation? In the 1980s, the vaccine industry came to Congress and said, we need help. The vaccine industry came in the 1980s and asked for a bailout. President Reagan at the time said this is not a good idea, but Congress went ahead and bailed them out. And the reason that they gave was, we have so many lawsuits, we cannot make vaccines. We cannot afford to be in business. So the government bailed them out, and the government then took over the oversight with a mandate that every 2 years they would do safety studies on different vaccines. Up to this point, 2020, now we're talking about 40, 50 years later, because this was like in the 70s and the 80s, let's just say in the last 40 years. Guess how many safety studies have been done by the U.S. government to assess the efficacy and safety of vaccines? I'll save you some time. 0. So the mandate that the government took over to do oversight has been totally ignored. Now, and it's not that they did it on purpose. I think they just, like the government, they dropped the ball. Now, let's say that I file a lawsuit against a vaccine manufacturer. Guess who the defendant is on that lawsuit when it's filed with the government? The defendant is not that vaccine manufacturer. It's HHS. It's the Health and Human Services. It's the U.S. government that you're suing because of a vaccine injury. And guess who's defending the U.S. government? The Department of Justice. So when you have a child that's been injured, you're fighting the Department of Justice. You're fighting the U.S. government. And remember, the Department of Justice is supposed to be making sure that justice is being done. Instead, they are fighting to defend the Health and Human Services, from somebody who's been injured. Now, does that make any sense whatsoever? Remember this, if you wear a face mask, you are restricting your oxygen, you are increasing the amount of carbon dioxide that you're breathing back. The face masks themselves, they've already done studies on the face mask, and you're breathing in the same stuff in and out, so there's actually an increased amount of bacteria that accumulates from what you're breathing. The condensation from your breath is breaking down the polypropylene components of the face mask, and then you're breathing in those toxic components and creating a histotoxic it's a histotoxic hypoxic injury. You're obviously becoming hypoxic from just breathing in the not being able to get in fresh oxygen, but then you're also increasing your cortisol levels, and that drives you into the flight-fight response, which is a sympathetic mimetic overdrive, and then that suppresses your immune system. And these are all common things. These are all easily proven, published things. You don't have to be a rocket science to understand this. I've even had people try to challenge me, and they're like, "How do you know that?" I'm like, seriously? It's like saying, well, if I walk out in the rain without an umbrella, you're going to get wet. How do you know that? How can you prove that you get wet? Well, okay, if you don't know that water on top of you is going to make you wet, then that's, everybody knows that steroids and cortisol suppress the immune system. It's a fundamental aspect of life. It's a fundamental aspect of physiology. It's just like, how do you know that you need more oxygen? Well, because without oxygen, we die. Okay, so put anything that restricts your oxygen flow is going to cause a problem. And again, all the things that I'm talking about, like the polypropylene components of the mask and all these different things that I'm giving you to empower you with information so you know what's really happening, that's all assuming that it was actually a benefit conferred by the mask. It's not. The pores are so big compared to the particles that they're trying to keep out. As I've said before, it's like building a chain link fence and trying to keep dust particles out. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It just simply doesn't work. And then the people are trying to say, well, for the particulate matter and from breathing aspect, guys, you're increasing your own susceptibility when you wear a mask to every pathogen that's out there, virus, bacteria, spirochetes, mycoplasma, yeast, fungi, parasites, whatever. You are increasing your own susceptibility when you wear a mask. You're stressing your body out. You're making your body weaker. You're making yourself hypoxic. You are more susceptible, more vulnerable to any pathogen. Okay? And any person who challenges that, they've already compromised their integrity. This is like telling you that the sky is not blue. Okay? I'm telling you the sky is blue. No matter what you want to call it, it's blue. And anybody who says the sky is not blue and they want to challenge my credentials or they want to challenge my information or my resources or whatever they want to challenge, they can label it whatever they want. Guess what? It doesn't change the fact the sky is still blue. Okay? You can make yourself to be any type of authority, that you are authority on the sky, and it's not blue, and don't believe anything that anybody's saying, but the sky is still blue.
All the heroes, all the villains, all the gods and goddesses, and all of the knights, and all of the fantastic creatures we can conjure up in animation, they're all in there, because they're all in here. Because they're all in here. This is where they come from.
If you look at some of the greatest pieces of literature, the greatest works of philosophy, they all have what Joseph Campbell called the hero's journey.
And if you look with a piercing eye, you can recognize his outline in just about any movie or story you would read.
Star Wars, The Matrix, Harry Potter,
Wizard of Oz. That's a classic story of a hero's journey. You first see Dorothy in her natural environment. And just like out here in regular life, a person is operating in their natural environment every day and living in their house and that kind of thing. And then something happens to shake that world up. And you go on a journey in which you have to face certain tests and challenges.
Storytelling is typically about people learning something. You go to a place which is dark and mysterious. You are faced with yourself. There is a relationship between facing fear and this kind of soul gain. You acquire a quality, a hidden strength, a value. Moments where somebody is tested, somebody moves to a place where it feels like a crisis point, and then they are restored, redeemed, made better through that trial. And we call them heroes.
Once upon a time in the forest, there was this little tiger cub amongst a flock of sheep. And he ate grass, and he wandered around with the sheep. And when he tried to say anything, all that came out was a sort of little meow, not much of a roar. And one day, through the forest comes a large male tiger. And he's just about to pounce on the sheep, and he sees this tiger cub. He says, "What are you doing here?" The tiger cub goes, "Ah." Picks the tiger cub up by the scruff of the neck, and he carries him over to a pond, and he puts his face over it, and he says, "Look, see that face? You're not a sheep, you're a tiger." The male tiger says, "Okay, we need to do something." He slays a sheep and he grabs a big hunk of raw meat and he shoves it in the little tiger's mouth. And the little tiger gagged on it as all do on the truth. But it went down. And he got a little bit of energy, and pretty soon he had a bigger tiger roar. And eventually he had a full tiger roar, and he went off with the male tiger. I think the moral here is self-evident. If you're a tiger living among sheep, you're a pretty poor specimen of a tiger. And we are all tigers living among sheep. We are all individuals with a self that we don't even begin to understand. And unfortunately, if you can open the metaphor out, the food we get from the culture around us is maybe food for sheep. It's not food for tigers.